We are so pleased to be joined by Alastair Cunningham this evening, Director of the Reivers Road. Alastair first became involved in this travel industry when he found a tour operator at Clans and Castles. However, when he stepped down as director in 2018, he began looking for a new project, and that's when the Reivers Road was born. This is a driving route which takes you around many highlights in the Scottish borders, accompanied by a virtual tour guide. So thank you so much for joining me today, Alastair. Why don't you start by telling us all about Reivers Road? What is the story and how did you come up with the idea?
Delighted. Well, you said I was looking for something else to do. This idea of the Reivers Road was welling up in my last years before I sold Clans and Castles, because Clans and Castles is a tour operator driven by what people, mostly in North America, want. And so they're saying, we'd like to visit St Andrews, we'd like to see Loch Ness, we'd like to go to the McTaggart Lands, whatever it is. And being in the borders, we noticed that it was very rare for anyone to say they wanted to come to the borders. And there is so much culture, there's so many interesting stories, there's so much to say about the borders, so much to see, that we thought that we ought to try and do something to help tourism in the borders. And when I say we, you introduced me as the director of Clans and Castles. There's two of us, Debbie Webster and I, set up the company together.
Right. So cutting edge technology delivers a virtual tour guide allowing visitors to experience the stories, history, drama and music as they explore the local area. So can you explain how the tours work and the technology involved?
Well, I can certainly explain how the tours work. The technology is still a bit of a mystery to me, but it does work. When we started this idea, we thought at first that we might give people written sheets of paper that they could see what was available in the various valleys of the borders. And then we thought, well, we can do better than that. And so we thought, well, we'd have a recording. And then we thought, well, how does that work? Because people drive at different speeds and take different routes. And then we ended up thinking about having a GPS trigger. And so that when you get to a certain place, ping, and the voice comes on. And you're seeing in the distance the valley of this, that and the other, and this is the valley where the Reivers went, and here's the story, and da-da-da-da-da. And so that seemed good, and then we thought, well, perhaps we can do a bit better than that still. Rather than just having somebody talking, we can have, as you say, a bit of music, a bit of poetry, and we've also got some speakers from other places that tell us about things. For example, up at the top of Eskdale Muir, there's the Sammy Ling Monastery. Well, we've got one of the nuns from Sammy Ling to talk about that. And we've got specialists who can talk about particular parts of the country. But as to the technology, it's all to do with satellites and mobile phones. And it works.
No, that makes total sense. I hadn't even thought about people driving at different speeds. So the GPS, that is such a clever idea, isn't it?
Well, it has proved more time-consuming than we had imagined, trying to work out what speed most people will drive at. And then, if you've got a flock of sheep or a tractor or a set of traffic lights, then it all changes. So you've got to have the facility for people to stop, wait, and then start again.
So taking part in the tour sounds like so much fun, and despite growing up here in the borders, it sounds like I would still have a lot to learn. So how do I go about signing up for a tour, and what should I expect?
Okay, well, the first thing you do is you download the app, which costs nothing at all. And then you can choose one from 4 trails. And the trails that we currently have on the app are the Hermitage Trail, which goes from Hawick down to Hermitage Castle, Newcastleton, and ends up in Langham. the Ettrick Trail, which starts at Langham and goes up Eskdale into Ettrick, a lot about the Ettrick Shepherd, and down past Ettrick Bridge, stories of the Reivers, and finishes at Selkirk.
Okay.
And then we have the Hume Trail, which may be of particular interest to you because it starts at Kelso, goes up to Stitchell, and then by Greenlaw to Dunse.
Oh, right, amazing.
And from Dunse we go to Wedderburn Castle, and then we go to Berwick upon Tweed, and from Berwick we come back up the Tweed by Norham to Coldstream.
Oh, wow.
And lastly, we have the Flodden Trail, which starts at Coldstream and goes down, as you might expect, to Flodden. And then from Flodden we go to Kirk Yetholm and the foothills of the Cheviots, then to Moorbattle, Jedburgh and Hoyk.
Oh wow, so it's a full circle then, it all comes back to, they all meet each other then, yeah?
Yes, they all meet each other.
Right.
We will, when we have 6 trails, then they will all meet each other. We've only got 4 live at the moment.
Right.
2 are under construction.
Oh, okay, amazing. So what was involved when designing each of these different tours? Did you conduct all of the research yourself?
Yes, I'm the one that's responsible for the research.
Okay.
And the problem I faced with all of these tours is there's too much to say, and you can't be battering people with information all the way down the road. You've got to give them a little time to look around and talk about what they've had and chat.
Yeah.
And so we try to we present things in sort of manageable pieces, manageable stories, and then after a few stories then we produce some music or poetry or whatever.
Yeah, to give them time to discuss it or
That's right,
talk about it. Yeah, that makes sense. So how did you first become interested in Scottish history? Did growing up in the Scottish borders ignite your passion at all?
It probably ignited it, but the passion really didn't grow into a big flame until probably the last 5 years, when I'd become very interested. I've been tour guiding in the rest of Scotland for about 20 years now. And as I said at the start, the borders seems to be ignored by an awful lot of people from North America. We get quite a lot of people visiting from the rest of the UK. But having learnt about Scottish history as relates to the rest of Scotland, it was very interesting to put that together with what we're seeing and what happened in the borders.
Yeah, definitely. It's a completely different part of Scottish history, isn't it?
It is. It's also a part of Scotland that has got a very distinct culture. Reivers, common ridings, ballads collected by Sir Walter Scott, legends, and they all tie in together.
Yeah.
And it's a culture that is quite separate from anywhere else in Scotland. And other places in Scotland, there are lots of great stories and things going on, but here it's all quite discreet. It all feeds into itself.
Yeah, no, definitely, I would agree with that. So as you said, the Borders is steeped in so much history and tradition, from, as you mentioned, the Border Reivers to the Battle of Flodden. So how did you choose which stories to cover within the tours?
Well, it's difficult, and what drove what we cover is what are you seeing out the window, and so we had to choose interesting routes, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the borders, a lot of stories that are not covered. We don't have a tour that goes past Melrose Abbey. We obviously mention Melrose Abbey, but it's pointless talking a lot about somewhere that they don't see, and you can't see everything. No. So we chose the routes, partly driven by the fact that they're attractive routes, partly driven by the fact that there's interesting stories involved, and we tried so far as possible to avoid the main roads, so that people can go at a reasonable speed, and enjoy the countryside.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And through your research and experience as a tour guide, I can imagine you have learned some little known facts about the Borders. Do you have a particular favourite?
A little known fact. I guess I didn't know. An area I did not know at all in the Borders was Eskdale. And there are fascinating stories going all the way up Eskdale. From Thomas Telford, who was born in Eskdale and became the first president of the Institution of Engineers, to a chap called Johnson, who was a correspondent in a divorce case, and the other correspondent was Edward VII. And then there was a King Shaw of the Picts who was buried up there. There were stories of King Arthur, and then there were the monks that came and founded the Samueling Monastery. Extraordinary number of stories in a valley which most people don't know at all.
Yeah, well, I don't think I've ever been there, so maybe I need to go and venture there and learn for myself. And do you have any plans to introduce any new routes to the Reivers Road?
Well, as I said, we've got 4 going at the moment, and the 2 more that are on the website, and which we're working on. And once we've got these 4 running and lots of people are enjoying them, then we'll move on to the other 2.
Yeah, you'll get these 6 nailed and then.
Inevitably there'll be a bit of feedback as to how we do these things.
Yeah, maybe people will send you in stories that they would like to see the location of, maybe, and then you can design the routes.
They may, but as I say, the problem normally is working out sort of how much you can afford to have in there. Strangely enough, there are normally more stories than there is time to tell them.
Yeah, that is the case, isn't it? And if you could only recommend one place for people to visit in the Scottish Borders, where would it be?
Oh, I'd have to say Duns.
Of course. And why is that?
Well, it's a charming spot because it's apart from the obvious attraction, there's that wonderful bear called Wojciech.
Oh yeah.
Who was enrolled in the Polish army in the Second War and fought at the Battle of Monte Cassino, and ended up at the airfield there with the Polish unit. Just outside, I can't remember the name of the airfield now, but just outside Duns.
Oh yeah.
And from there, Wojciech the bear went to Edinburgh Zoo, where he saw out his time. But there are also great stories of the Humes around Wedderburn Castle and the Polwarth thorn, the thorn tree.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. The Humes of Polwarth, and the thorn tree, the song involving the thorn tree, which is still there.
Yeah.
There's masses of stories around there.
Yeah, there definitely is. There are a few of the good ones, aren't they? So what has been the most rewarding aspect for you since starting the business, would you say?
I'm glad you asked me for the most rewarding and not the most frustrating. Because there have been frustrations with this technology. Yeah. But the most rewarding was learning so much more about the Borders. I had no idea of some of these stories, and you suggested that people might send in stories. And yes, lots of people have said, "Oh, you've got to mention this, you've got to mention that," and there's masses of stuff to work through, and it's fascinating trying to tie it all up.
Yeah. No, there is so much to mention. You could make thousands of routes, couldn't you? And in June, we actually featured many of the different border traditions and spoke to James Royan, president of our local Dun Summer Festival. And being from the Borders yourself, do you immerse yourself in the common ridings and festivals?
I think immerse would probably be overdoing it, but I really enjoy the common ridings and festivals. I lived 9 years just outside Hawick, and in fact, the office that we had was just in the hub there, and eight ride-outs before the main Hoyt ride-out. You get 150, 200 horses coming down the street below the office and then heading off to wherever it is. A fantastic sight. And for someone coming from out with the borders and spending a day there, suddenly you get all these smart people all dressed up. And of course, the actual weekend itself. I mean, it's not just the Friday, which is the big day, but the Saturday and the Thursday night. Yeah. There's so much going on, so much pride, so much fun, so many different things which reach right back into history. Yeah. Fascinating.
It is definitely a unique experience, especially for an outsider to the borders to experience as well. And finally, what would you say to encourage people to come and visit the Scottish borders?
Well, I'd say come and see the wonderful Tweed Valley and all its tributaries. Come and see the great castles. There's just so much to see and to enjoy. There's fantastic countryside. There's great stories of the Reivers, and before the Reivers, the legends, and after the Reivers, the whole business of the 18th century. And borderers are welcoming, and there's all sorts of new businesses appearing in the borders, which little cafes, manufacturing, the Borders Distillery, Johnson de Velgen. There's so much going on, and it's a great place to spend a holiday.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Alastair, and sharing your insights on the history of the Scottish borders. I can't wait to go for my own tour soon and look forward to seeing which routes you introduce in the future.
Okay.